There's nothing you need to do right now. Nothing to remember, nothing to finish, nothing to hold. Whatever carried you through the day, the small weights of it, the long list of it, you can set all of that down now, here, at the edge of this moment. Let your shoulders find the surface beneath them. Let your jaw loosen just slightly. Let your hands open, if they haven't already, and rest against whatever is soft and near. You are going somewhere very quiet tonight, somewhere that moves, but slowly. So slowly, the motion feels less like travel and more like breathing. Somewhere warm and dimly lit, where the air carries the smell of old paper and beeswax and something faintly mineral, like stone that has been near water for a very long time. Somewhere that has been waiting for you, patient and unhurried, the way deep places always wait. There's nothing to understand before you arrive. There's no map to consult, no preparation to make. Simply let your breathing slow. In, gently, and without effort, and out, long and easy, like a tide withdrawing from a shore it has touched 1,000 times before. In and out. The story is already in motion. The wheels are already turning on the wet rail somewhere far below the world you know. The lanterns are already lit. The scrolls are already hanging in their long, patient rows, whispering softly to one another as the carriage sways. All you have to do is arrive. All you have to do is close your eyes and let the train find you, the way the deep dark finds everything, in time, gently and without hurry, and with great, unhurried warmth. So, let us begin. You become aware of the floor first. Not the floor of wherever you are lying, but another floor, a lacquered wooden floor, dark amber in the lantern light, gently warm beneath the soles of your feet. It sways, a slow lateral rocking, side to side, so steady and so regular that your body accepts it almost immediately, the way a body accepts a hammock once the swinging has settled into its rhythm. Left and right, left and right. The wood grain runs lengthwise along the car, and in the amber light, you can just see the polished sheen of it. Years of beeswax worked into the grain, layer over layer, until the floor itself seems to hold a faint inner warmth, like something that has been tended to, carefully, over a very long time. You are standing in a narrow corridor between two walls of hanging scrolls. They are everywhere, rolled tightly and clipped to horizontal brass rails that run the full length of the carriage, one rail above the other, 4 rails high on each side, each scroll hanging from a small brass clip that catches the amber light and gives it back in tiny, warm points. The scrolls themselves are of every color that paper can become with age, cream and ivory and pale ochre, some of them faintly brown at their edges. A few of the oldest ones darkened to a color like strong tea held up to a window. They do not move much, but when the carriage takes a long, slow curve in the tunnel, they sway together, just slightly, and make a sound, a papery, whispering exhale, as though the whole collection has just released a breath it had been holding since the last curve. You breathe in. The air is cool, not cold, cool, the way a room is cool when a stone wall is nearby and the stone is thinking about water somewhere deep inside it. Humid and soft against the backs of your hands, which are bare and which you can feel in that particular way. You feel your hands when the air is just moist enough to remind you of your own skin. There is beeswax here, warm and faintly sweet, released by the brass fittings wherever the lantern heat has reached them. And beneath the beeswax, patient and ancient and threaded through everything, the smell of old cellulose, old paper, old parchment, the particular dry and not quite dry smell of documents that have spent decades in a climate that is cool and damp and loving. And beneath even that, so faint it is almost imagined, limestone, the mineral breath of the tunnel beyond the carriage walls, damp rock, the trace of ancient sea, the smell that stone carries when it has been submerged for a very long time, and then slowly lifted. Except here, the stone was never lifted. Here the stone is still where it always was, and the water is still pressing gently on the tunnel from outside, and the smell of it drifts in through the seals and the porthole glass, and mingles with the beeswax and the old paper. And together, they make something that is entirely this place and no other. You hear the wheels. Always beneath everything, you hear the wheels. A low, rhythmic clank on the wet rail. Not a loud sound, not a sharp sound, but a steady, patient, metronomic sound, like a slow clock that doesn't count minutes so much as it counts the fact of moving, the fact of continuing, the fact of being here and then here again, forward and forward through the dark. Clank, clank, clank. The rail seams pass beneath the carriage at the same interval, always the same interval, and your body already knows this interval, already leans into it just slightly, already trusts it the way a sleeping person trusts a sound they have been hearing long enough that it has entered their dreams as part of the landscape rather than as an intrusion. You look toward the nearest porthole. It is round, framed in dark iron with a narrow rim of brass at its inner edge, and through it you can see the tunnel wall passing, limestone, pale and wet, running so close to the carriage that you could almost reach through the glass and press your palm to it. And as you watch, the wall pulses, softly. A green light, pale as sea glass, held against a cloudy sky. A bioluminescent flush that moves along the tunnel face in slow, irregular waves, brightening and fading, as though the rock itself is breathing, or as though something is breathing inside the rock, or as though the light is simply old light that has been sleeping in the mineral for longer than any record and wakes from time to time to remind itself that it still exists. The light comes and goes. You watch a long, slow bloom of it rise from somewhere below the rail line, travel up the tunnel wall, spread across the ceiling of the limestone arch above the train, and fade. And then the dark again. And then, a little further along, another bloom, smaller this time, but brighter, more concentrated. A tight knot of pale green fire in the wall that flares for 3 seconds and softens and is gone. You turn away from the porthole. Somewhere toward the back of the train, very faintly, a brass fitting ticks against the wall as the carriage takes a long curve in the tunnel. It ticks once, twice, irregular and unhurried, and then the curve straightens, and the ticking stops, and the rhythmic clank of the wheels comes back fully, filling the quiet space the ticking had briefly occupied. The lanterns sway with the curve. They are small brass lanterns, one at each end of the carriage, mounted on swiveling brackets so they can move with the train without spilling. And as the carriage straightens, their amber light swings back to level, and the shadows in the scroll-lined corridor settle and pool back into the places they have always occupied. The corners of the carriage, the gap between the highest rail and the ceiling, the narrow space behind the rows of hanging scrolls, where the wall itself disappears into dimness, and you can only just see the bolts that hold the rails in place, dark with age, faintly patinated, doing their patient work invisibly. You are the Papertender. This is something you know the way you know your own name, not because anyone told you, not because you read it somewhere, but because it is simply true, the way your hands are true, and the floor beneath your feet is true. You tend the paper. You care for the collection. You rehang the scrolls that have been taken down for airing, checking each one, smoothing any edges that have curled, pressing each brass clip open and closed with a soft, familiar pressure until the scroll is secure. This is your work. And tonight, your work is gentle, as it almost always is. You have a task to complete in Car 7. A series of tide charts that were taken down some days ago and have been airing in their soft cotton wrappings, waiting for you to come and return them to their places. You are not in Car 7 yet. You are making your way there, through the train, through the quiet, swaying cars, through the amber light and the papery whisper and the cool, humid air. There is no urgency. There is never urgency here. You begin to walk. The carriage you are moving through is one of the middle cars. Car 4, you believe, or perhaps Car 5. The scrolls here are mostly botanical records, pressed specimens sandwiched between thin sheets of protective tissue, their stems and leaves visible through the paper as faint, dark impressions, like shadows pressed into the surface and left there when the thing that cast them was long gone. Some of these specimens have been on the train for longer than you have been tending it. You know this without knowing how you know it. The tissue protecting them has yellowed at the corners, and the clips that hold them, slightly different in design from the newer clips further along the car, have a deeper patina, a particular darkness in the creases where brass becomes almost brown with age. You run a finger along one of the rails as you walk, feeling the smooth warmth of the brass against your fingertip, beeswax and warmth, and the faint vibration of the train running through the metal. At the end of Car 4, you pass through a small connecting vestibule. It is just wide enough for one person. A narrow, close-walled space between the cars, where the sound of the wheels is louder, transmitted directly through the floor without the insulation of the carriage body, and where the air is a degree or two cooler, carrying a stronger trace of the tunnel outside. Limestone, stronger here, the mineral smell of deep, wet stone, thick and faintly briny, as though the ancient sea that formed this rock has not entirely left, as though it has merely retreated into the pores of the limestone and breathes out from there, slowly, through microscopic openings, one molecule at a time, over millennia. You pause for a moment in the vestibule and simply breathe it in. The coolness on the backs of your hands is more pronounced here. The sway of the train is more noticeable. You can feel the slight give in the coupling between the cars, a gentle articulation in the motion, as though the train is not one rigid thing, but a series of trusting connections, each car following the one before it through the curves in the deep rock, following and being followed, and you in the middle of it, unhurried, pausing in a small vestibule to breathe the smell of stone and feel the cool air and listen to the wheels, which are very present here, which say, moving, 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 always moving. This is what we do. You push open the door to car 5. The warmth returns immediately. The amber lanterns, the lacquered floor, the long rows of hanging documents. And here, in car 5, the collection changes its character. These are ledgers, water-warped, swollen at their edges, the covers buckled and soft with old moisture, but dry now, and flat enough to have been pressed between boards for some time before being allowed to hang. They are bound with cord through holes punched in their top margins, and they hang from the brass clips by this cord, the pages fanning very slightly in the moving air from the ventilation slots above. Their covers are various colors, all muted now by time. Burgundy faded to a dusty rose, green faded to something almost gray, black faded to a deep charcoal that catches the lantern light on its raised surfaces and absorbs it completely in the recesses. Some have labels on their covers, handwritten in faded ink, numerals mostly, and abbreviations you don't fully recognize, from cities and registrars and administrative offices that no longer exist in any form except these hanging volumes, swaying gently in the amber light of a narrow-gauge carriage somewhere below the continental shelf. You slow your pace here, as you often do in car 5. There is something in the ledgers that invites patience. Perhaps it is the thought of all the careful hands that made them, the clerks and cartographers and city archivists who filled these pages with their notations, who bound these spines, who carried these volumes to wherever it was they were when the water came, and somehow, through some series of salvages and exchanges and sealed canisters passed between unhurried hands, found their way here, to the Cartulary train, to these brass clips, to this amber light. You walk slowly. You let one hand trail along the hanging ledgers as you pass, feeling the slight give of the warped covers under your fingertips, the faint texture of old cloth boards, the raised ridges of the cord bindings above. A pale green pulse moves across the porthole glass on the left side of the carriage. You catch it in your peripheral vision, that soft bloom of bioluminescence traveling up the tunnel wall, and you turn just in time to see the end of it, the fading edge of the light retreating upward and disappearing into the arch of the ceiling. The tunnel wall beyond the glass is wet. You can see thin rivulets of water running down its face, catching the pulse light before it fades, holding the green for just a fraction of a second longer than the rock itself does. And then it is dark again, and the porthole shows only the close limestone wall and the faint reflected amber of the lantern behind you, caught in the convex surface of the glass. You breathe. You walk. The wheels say, clank, clank, clank. Patient and even and deeply familiar now, as familiar as a heartbeat, as familiar as breath. Somewhere near the middle of car 5, you stop. On the right-hand side of the carriage, at about the height of your eyes, a single botanical specimen scroll has come loose from its clip, not fallen, just released at one side so that it hangs at an angle, the paper edge soft and curved where it has been unrestrained. You take this in without alarm. This happens. The vibration of the train over the course of a long passage will occasionally work a clip open just enough for a scroll to sag. You reach up and press the loose clip firmly closed with your thumb and forefinger, feeling the small resistance of the spring, the satisfying catch as the brass teeth meet and hold. The scroll straightens, It hangs level now alongside its neighbors, and you smooth the edge of the paper very gently with one finger. Just a single pass, barely touching. A gesture more like an acknowledgement than a correction. You continue on. The connecting vestibule between car 5 and car 6 is where you hear it for the first time tonight. A soft, distant tick, and then a slow, metallic slide, like something small and cylindrical being drawn along a cable on the outer hull of the train. You know this sound. It means you are passing a siding, a canister, sealed and addressed in some system of notations you have never needed to understand, is being exchanged, drawn in from a platform that exists somewhere in the dark beyond the tunnel wall, or sent out along the cable to some set of hands waiting in the deep. You cannot see the siding from here. You cannot see the hands. You don't need to. The sound is enough. The soft tick of the canister connecting with the receiving hook, the slow glide of the cable under load, the very faint vibration it sends through the outer wall of the vestibule, which you can feel through your fingertips if you are resting them against the panel. You rest your fingertips against the panel now. You feel the small tremor of the cable working, and then the cable goes still, and the tick and glide fades, and the train has passed the siding, and the sound of the wheels comes back in its full, steady measure, and the vestibule smells of limestone and cool air, and you push open the door to car 6. Car 6 is the one you think of as the chart car, though technically all the cars have charts of some kind. What makes car 6 particular is the scale of the materials here. These are large charts, wide format documents, many of them double the width of the standard scrolls, hung from 2 clips each, their surfaces detailed and dense with notation even from a distance. You don't unroll them as you walk. That is not tonight's task. And besides, these are not the tide charts you are looking for. Those are in car 7, already rolled, already wrapped, already waiting. These charts are the settled residents of car 6, and they need nothing from you tonight except the same steady presence you offer them as you pass. The warmth of your proximity, the slight stir of air from your movement, the occasional touch of your fingertips on a frame. The amber light here is slightly different in quality than in the other cars. One of the 2 lanterns, the one at the far end near the door to car 7, burns with a flame that is a shade paler than the other, almost golden rather than amber, and the light it casts has a slightly different quality against the large, flat surfaces of the hanging charts. It makes the charts look, from a certain angle, like windows, as though they are not paper at all, but openings in the carriage wall, and beyond them, you could step through into the territories they depict. You have noticed this before. You notice it again now. Pale golden light moving across the face of a large chart, and for a moment, just a moment, the depth of the notation, the careful layering of coastlines and soundings and tidal marks, seems to have an actual depth, a physical recession, as though you could reach through the surface and find water, and the memory of water, and the shape of places that were once above the water and are no longer. The scrolls whisper as the train takes a long, slow curve to the right. A collective exhale, all the large charts leaning fractionally leftward on their clips, their edges brushing the ones beside them, paper on paper, a sound like something between a sigh and a sentence, in a language made entirely of breath. The lanterns swing together in their brackets, a single slow pendulum movement, and the light on the charts tilts and settles, and the curve continues, and you brace yourself very gently against the right-hand wall with your shoulder, feeling the lacquered wood paneling warm and smooth and solid against you. The curve is long. The train knows these curves the way it knows everything, without urgency, without any apparent effort, simply leaning into the geometry of the tunnel, following the line that was laid down in the rock, following the grade of the deep stone. And then the curve ends, and the floor levels, and the lantern light settles, and the scrolls settle, and you straighten and continue toward the far end of car 6 and the door to car 7. Car 7. You open the door, and the familiar smell of this car reaches you. Beeswax. Stronger here than anywhere else on the train, because car 7's brass fittings are more numerous and more closely spaced. The rails for the hanging clips running 4 high on each side, and also, uniquely, down the center of the car, along a spine rail that hangs from the ceiling, doubling the storage capacity of the space. The center rail makes car 7 feel closer, more interior, as though you are walking not just through a carriage, but through the center of the collection itself, surrounded on all sides by hanging paper, wrapped in it, the scrolls and specimens and folded maps hanging from every rail within arm's reach, the amber lantern light filtering through all of it, slightly golden green, where the pale wrapping tissue over some of the specimens diffuses the flame. You take a moment to simply stand in the doorway and look. The car is very full. Almost every clip is occupied, and the occupied clips hold documents of many different types. The tide charts you are here to rehang are not yet visible because they are still in their cotton wrappings, stacked at the far end of the car on the low wooden shelf that runs beneath the end window. But around them, above them, beside them, hanging for every rail, the full breadth of the collection's knowledge of tides, maps of tidal systems for coastlines that no longer exist above sea level, tide tables calculated for harbor masters who administered ports that are now silt and dark water, charts of tidal bore patterns in river mouths, of tidal flat exposures, of the twice daily breathing of sea on shore across every coast that was ever carefully watched and recorded, and eventually, when the watching stations were overwhelmed, salvaged, cataloged, sealed in a canister, passed along the cable to the train. You step inside. The floor of car 7 is the same lacquered amber as all the others, but here, the center hanging rail casts a dividing shadow down the full length of it, a narrow, dark stripe running from door to end wall, with a warm lamplight spreading evenly on either side. You walk along this shadow line, not deliberately, just because it is the natural path, the open center of the car. And as you walk, you can feel the hanging scrolls on either side of you, almost grazing your sleeves, not quite touching, but close enough that when the carriage sways, the paper exhales against the fabric of your arms. That gentle whisper, paper against cloth, a sound so soft it is almost nothing, and yet so persistent, so rhythmic with the motion of the train, that it has its own place in the soundscape of the night. Beneath the wheel clank and the lantern creak and the deep mineral silence of the tunnel, just a breath of paper against moving air. At the far end of the car, you find the cotton-wrapped tide charts exactly where they should be. They are stacked in a neat row on the low shelf, 12 scrolls in total, each one wrapped in natural cotton muslin, tied at each end with a length of pale cord. Someone has labeled each one with a small paper tag, the writing on the tags in a careful, unhurried hand. And you take the first one from the shelf and turn the tag toward the lantern to read it. A tide system. The name of a coast. A set of dates that extends back further than you would have thought, and forward into something unspecified. You hold the scroll for a moment, feeling its weight, which is slight but real. The weight of rolled paper and whatever knowledge is coiled inside it. And then you carry it to the first empty clip on the right-hand upper rail and begin. You untie the cord at the top of the scroll first. The cord releases easily, having been loosely tied, and you tuck it into your pocket. You will retie the wrapping later, in case the scroll needs to be taken down again. Then you slide your fingers into the fold of the cotton muslin and unroll it from the scroll, slowly, as you would unroll anything old and carefully tended, without pulling, without haste, turning the scroll in your hands so that the wrapping falls away from it rather than being dragged. The scroll is now bare in your hands, smooth and cool, very slightly yielding. The surface of the paper an even cream color with a faint suggestion of the darker ink beneath, visible even through the rolled layers. You press the clip open with your thumb and slide the top edge of the scroll into the brass teeth, and then ease your thumb back and let the clip close. A soft, definitive snap. The scroll hangs. You step back slightly and look at it. It hangs straight and level, its bottom edge scrolled and weighted just enough by the paper's own density to keep it from curling, and it turns very slightly on its clip as the train takes a shallow gradient in the tunnel floor, and the carriage angles almost imperceptibly forward. Then the gradient levels and the scroll settles, and it is simply hanging there, patient as everything here is patient, doing exactly what it was made to do. You go back for the second scroll. This is the rhythm of the next long while. Back to the shelf, lift a scroll, carry it to its clip. Each scroll has a position in the car, indicated by the tag, and you are working your way down the right side of the upper rail from the far end toward the door, which means that with each scroll you hang, you are walking a slightly longer distance back to the shelf and a slightly shorter distance to the waiting clip. It is a slow orbit, a measured back and forth, and the regularity of it, the lift, the carry, the unwrap, the clip, begins to establish itself in your body the same way the wheel clank has, the same way the lateral sway has, as something known and trusted, something that can be done without the sharp part of attention, leaving the rest of you free to simply be here, to simply move through the warm amber light and the papery air and the cool humidity and the endlessly patient company of all these documents that have been waiting so long for someone to tend them. Third scroll. You untie the cord. You unwrap the muslin. The paper inside is slightly different in tone from the first two. A little more ochre, a little warmer, as though this chart was made in a different place or with a different kind of pigment in the sizing of the paper. When you slide it into its clip, the lantern light catches the surface at an angle, and you can see the impression of the coastline drawn on the innermost layer, a long, curved line, very faint, ghost of a shore. You stand for a moment with your fingers still lightly touching the edges of the scroll and look at that line. It curves gently from somewhere above the clip downward into the rolled portion of the scroll, and you don't know where it depicts, and it doesn't matter. And the not knowing is not uncomfortable, but simply spacious, like standing in a room that is larger than you expected and finding the extra space a gift. You let go. You walk back down the shadow line to the shelf. The wheels beneath you say, clank, clank, clank. A green pulse moves through the porthole on the left-hand wall. You catch it this time fully, looking straight through the glass when it arrives. It is brighter than the ones you saw earlier, a rich, pale green the color of sea ice in old photographs, and it travels slowly, unhurriedly across the tunnel face, drawing upward in a broad band that spreads as it rises, like something blooming in slow motion. You watch it until it fades, which takes perhaps 3 or 4 seconds, and then the tunnel wall is dark limestone again, wet and close, and the green is gone. But the image of it stays for a moment on the inside of your eyes, a soft afterglow the color of shallow water, and you carry it with you as you pick up the 4th scroll from the shelf and carry it to its clip. 4th scroll. 5th. The unwrapping has become entirely automatic now, your hands knowing the motion without asking your attention for it. The cord, the muslin, the slow rotation to let the wrapping fall away, the press of the clip. You are not thinking. You are only doing, in the gentle and half-dreaming way that real work becomes when it has been done enough times, and the hands have taken it fully into themselves. The carriage sways. The scrolls on the already occupied clips whisper against your sleeves as you pass. The amber light holds steady in the lanterns, moving only when a curve in the tunnel brings a slight extra swing to the brackets, and then lets them settle again. Between the 6th and 7th scrolls, the train slows. You notice it first in your feet, a very slight change in the frequency of the wheel clank as the train loses just a fraction of its pace, the intervals between the rail joint sounds growing just barely longer. Not stopping. The train never stops, only slowing, the way it always slows at a siding, a gradual, unhurried reduction in speed, like a long exhale, like something that has been moving very steadily, deciding to move just a little more steadily still. And then, through the outer hull of the carriage, transmitted through the wall, through the air between the paneling and the brass lantern bracket, through the subtle medium of the warm wood itself, a soft sound, a tick, and then the slow slide of the canister cable, that low metallic whisper you heard in the vestibule earlier, but closer now, more present, a sound like a single long drawn note on an instrument made of wire and intention. You don't go to the porthole to look. The siding is outside, and the dark is outside, and the unseen hands are doing what they do, and none of it requires your presence. You simply stand still for a moment in the center of car 7, 7th scroll in your hands, its cotton wrapping half undone, and you listen to the cable work, the tick of the canister finding its home at the other end. A cessation. Stillness along the hull. And then the train gradually, without any single decisive moment, resumes its full pace, the wheel clank returning to its familiar interval, and the slight change in your feet disappears, and the carriage is simply moving again, as it was before, as it always is. You finish unwrapping the 7th scroll. you carry it to its clip. By the 8th scroll, you have fallen into something that is not quite thought and not quite the absence of thought. A middle state, warm and diffuse, where the boundaries of the task and the boundaries of the carriage and the boundaries of your own body have softened just slightly, as though everything in Car 7 has agreed to be a little less distinct than usual. The scrolls hanging from the clips are both scrolls and not scrolls. They are also just vertical shapes in the amber light, just the soft texture of paper in your peripheral vision, just the occasional whisper against your sleeve as you pass. The lanterns are both lanterns and not lanterns. They are also just warmth, just the quality of amber, just the particular way the light pools on the lacquered floor and makes the wood look like it's lit from inside. The train is both a train and not a train. It is also just the motion, just the rocking, just the wheel clank that has been underneath everything since before you arrived and will continue underneath everything long after you have stopped paying attention to it. You lift the 8th scroll. You carry it. You unwrap it slowly. This one, when the muslin falls away, gives off a small puff of air. Not quite a smell, but the trace of one, the ghost of a scent that was trapped in the wrapping during the airing process and is only now released. Dry, faintly sweet. The particular smell of old paper in a warm room, which is different from old paper in a cold room. Warmer, softer, less sharp. The cellulose and the sizing and the ink and all the years of handling combining into something that is simply the smell of this document, having been itself in its own particular way for a very long time. You breathe it in. It sits in the air around the scroll for just a moment and then disperses, thinned by the cool humidity of the carriage, and you are left with the scroll in your hands and the faint, pleasant memory of what you just smelled, and the clip is just above you, and you press it open and hang the scroll. 8th scroll, done. You move along to the 9th. The shelf is noticeably lighter now. 3 scrolls remain where 12 were stacked at the beginning of the task, and the reduced weight has allowed the shelf to show itself more fully, its worn surface visible between the remaining cotton-wrapped cylinders. The wood of the shelf is old, older than most of the car, older perhaps than the car itself, the kind of repurposed wood that carries evidence of previous lives in its grain, a faint scar where a fastening was once removed, a slight darkening along one edge where something liquid rested long ago and left its memory. You look at this shelf for a moment while you pick up the 9th scroll. You look at the evidence of use, the quiet testimony of something that has held things for a long time without being asked to announce this. Then you carry the 9th scroll to its clip. The 9th scroll is the widest of the set. It requires both clips on its rail, the 2 clips at either end of its top edge, and you must position it carefully, pressing each clip in sequence while holding the scroll level with your other hand. This takes more concentration than the single clip scrolls, and the concentration is not unpleasant. It calls you gently back to the specific, to the particular shape of this scroll, the weight of it, the slightly different texture of its paper at each edge where the rolling has compressed the fibers. You press the left clip. It catches. You press the right clip, holding the scroll level with your other hand so it doesn't torque on the single clip's axis. It catches. You let go. The scroll hangs straight. wide and even and level, its surface showing the faintest impression of what is inside. A dense, detailed chart, lots of small notation, the kind of document you would need to unroll fully to read, but which even half seen conveys a sense of great care, of someone having spent many patient hours at a drafting table somewhere above the level of the current sea, making a record that would outlast their city. You step back. You look at it for a moment. Then you go back for the 10th. 2 scrolls remain on the shelf after the 10th is hung. You are more than halfway through, and the task has reached its own kind of ease, an ease made of completion, of the growing number of scrolls hanging in their rightful places, the car gradually becoming more fully itself, the gaps in the clip rail closing one by one until the rail is nearly unbroken in its row of hanging paper. You can see the difference from where you stand at the far end of the car, looking back toward the door. The right side of the upper rail is now almost fully occupied, each scroll hanging at its proper interval, and the amber light falling across all of them makes a long, continuous warmth down the length of the wall, a kind of visual hum. You pick up the 11th scroll. It is lighter than you expected, the lightest of the set, and you hold it in one hand as you walk, the cotton wrapping slipping fractionally at one end so that you tuck it back before untying the cord. This one, you notice, has a different kind of tag. Not the same paper as the others, slightly glossier, the writing on it in a different hand, a more hurried-looking script that somehow still manages to convey precision, as though the writer wrote quickly, but always with complete intention. You carry it to its clip and hang it, and as it settles into place, there's a moment where the paper moves, not because of the carriage's motion, but because the clipping of it released a small pocket of air from the tight roll, and the air escaped through the bottom of the scroll and stirred it gently from within, and the scroll drifted a centimeter to the left and a centimeter back to center and stilled. A small, alive motion. A breath released. One scroll left. You carry the last scroll to the last empty clip on the right-hand upper rail, and you perform the untying and the unwrapping and the pressing one final time, slowly as the first, giving the task the same attention at its end as you gave it at its beginning. This is something you believe in without having had to decide to believe in it, that endings deserve the same presence as beginnings, that the last thing and the first thing are equally real, equally deserving of unhurried hands. You untie the cord. You unroll the muslin. The paper inside is the color of old honey, a rich, warm cream, and it is the most beautiful paper of the 12, not in any dramatic way, but in the quiet way of something that was made with particular care and has been kept with the same care, so that it has arrived in your hands not diminished by its long journey, but somehow refined by it, the way certain things become more themselves with time. You press the clip open. You slide the top edge of the scroll in. You let the clip close. Done. The right-hand upper rail is full. All 12 tide charts hang in their places, evenly spaced, their ivory and ochre and honey-colored surfaces catching the amber light in a long, warm row. The cotton wrappings are folded and tucked into your pocket. The cords are tucked beside them. The shelf at the far end of the car is bare and quiet, its old wood visible now in full, its surface a shade darker than the lacquered floor, unpolished, unhurried, entirely at ease with what it is. You stand for a moment in the center of Car 7 and take in the finished work. The scrolls hang, the lanterns burn, the wheels say, clank, 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 patient and unhurried, forward through the dark. A pale green pulse moves slowly across the left side porthole glass, drawing its bioluminescent path up the tunnel face, brightening and fading. The carriage sways with a long, shallow curve. All 12 tide charts lean fractionally together on their clips and whisper. All 12 at once, a single collective exhale, paper against warm air, and then settle as the curve straightens and the car returns to its level rocking, and the sound of 12 scrolls whispering fades into the deeper sound of the train. You have done what you came to do. At the near end of Car 7, set slightly into the wall beside the door you came through, there is a narrow wooden chair. You have seen it every time you have been in this car, and you have always been in motion when you saw it, arriving or leaving, carrying something, walking with purpose. Tonight, for the first time, or perhaps only the first time you have chosen to notice, you see it as something that is waiting for you, not impatiently, not with any urgency. The chair is simply there, and it is the right size, and the angle of it against the wall is exactly the angle of someone who has settled there before and found it good, and the hollow in the worn seat cushion is the hollow of accumulated rest, and the back of the chair is just high enough to lean against without having to decide to lean. And you walk toward it now, slowly, and you sit down. The chair receives you. That is the only way to say it. It receives you, the way a chair knows how to do when it has been broken in by years of exactly this motion. Your back finds the back. Your hands find your lap. Your feet, still on the lacquered floor, feel the train moving beneath them, the constant deep vibration of it, the wheel clank transmitted through the wood, through the floor joists, through the legs of the chair, up through the seat, and into the base of your spine, where it sits as something not unpleasant, a low hum, a massage from the engine of motion itself. You look down the length of Car 7, all 12 tide charts, the amber light on their surfaces, the center rail casting its thin dividing shadow down the middle of the floor, the far end of the car with its bare shelf and its porthole, and, just visible through the porthole, the tunnel wall moving slowly past, limestone, wet, pale, veined with thin mineral lines in colors that are invisible, except when a bioluminescent pulse crosses the surface and briefly illuminates the geology of this deep place in one soft, even bloom of green. As you watch, a pulse comes. It is a long one, broader and more sustained than any you have seen tonight, arriving low on the tunnel wall and moving upward in a wide, diffuse bloom that covers the entire visible face of the rock. A gentle green radiance that holds for 5, 6, 7 seconds before beginning to fade at its edges, pulling back toward its center, contracting to a bright knot at the apex, and then gone. Just dark tunnel and wet stone, and the amber reflection of the lantern in the convex porthole glass. You feel the train sway. You feel the chair sway with it. A slow rock, side to side. A motion so familiar by now that your body no longer registers it as motion at all, only as a kind of aliveness in the world. A reminder that you are somewhere that is moving, somewhere that is alive in its own way, somewhere that has been in motion for longer than your presence here, and will continue in motion after. This does not make you feel small. It makes you feel held. Your hands rest in your lap. They are still. The cotton wrappings and the cords are in your pockets, and they make small, soft bulges against your sides, the tactile evidence of work completed. Your shoulders, which carried the back and forth of the task for the past. How long? You don't know. Your shoulders are settling now, giving themselves to gravity in the back of the chair, releasing the mild-held attention of the work into a simpler, more open ease. You roll your shoulders once, very gently, just to feel them settle. They settle. The smell of the car is everywhere. Beeswax, warm brass, old cellulose. The faint undertone of limestone from the tunnel beyond the hull. And something else, very faint, released by the 12 tide charts and their airing. A clean scent, almost scentless, the smell of paper that has been exposed to moving air and returned to rest, carrying with it a trace of the clean, anonymous air of the airing room, wherever that was, and the memory of the outside that paper always retains, however long it has been rolled and stored. You breathe it in, you breathe it out. In, out. The wheels. Clank, clank, clank. You let your eyes close for a moment. Not a committed closing, just a resting. The way eyes need to rest when they have been taking an amber light for a long, unhurried time, and the light is warm, and the room is warm, and there's nothing more to look for, nothing left to find. In the darkness of your closed eyes, you can still see the car, the shape of it, the rails, the hanging scrolls, because you have been here long enough for it to be inside you, for the pattern of it to have laid itself down in some quiet layer of your mind, where it will be available for a while. A gentle internal lantern. You see the 12 tide charts. You see the amber light. You see the pale green pulse moving slowly up the tunnel wall, and the motion of it in your inner vision is even smoother than it was through the porthole glass. Perfectly smooth, perfectly slow, like something moving in deep water, unhurried by anything, belonging entirely to its own pace. You open your eyes. The car is as you left it. Still, warm, amber, all 12 scrolls in place. Through the far porthole, a brief, small pulse of green, and gone. You settle back further into the chair. The train is moving through a longer stretch of tunnel now. You can tell because the curves have been absent for a while. The floor perfectly level. The wheel clank perfectly even. No subtle changes in the rhythm or the tilt of the lanterns to indicate a bend in the track. Just straight movement through the deep stone, the tunnel walls running parallel to the train, the track running true, the wheels on the wet rail maintaining their patient count. Clank, clank, clank. Forward and forward. Deeper and deeper into the warm dark. The tunnel outside is darker here in the straight stretch, or perhaps the bioluminescent colonies are less dense along this passage. Whatever the reason, several minutes pass without a green pulse, and the view from the porthole is only the close limestone wall moving past and the reflected amber light from inside the car. And this is also good. The darkness outside has its own quality, its own weight. The weight of deep water pressing gently on the tunnel walls from beyond. The weight of all that rock above and around. The great patient mass of the continental shelf doing what it has done for geological time, which is simply to be there, to hold the water, to let the water flow through its cracks and fissures, and fill its caves, to be in its slow conversation with the sea. The train moves through this weight as though it belongs here. It does belong here. You belong here. You let your eyes close again, a little longer this time. The sounds of the train continue in the dark behind your closed eyes. The wheel clank, low and steady. The creak of the lantern brackets with each small motion of the carriage. The near subliminal hush of the water outside the hull. The occasional papery whisper of a scroll stirring in the vent air. These sounds are the train, and the train is the world, and the world is warm and steady and moving, and you are in it, in the chair, in car 7, in the amber light. The warmth of the lanterns is on your face. You feel it, a gentle warmth, distant enough not to be hot, close enough to be a presence, the way firelight feels when you are at the right distance from it. Your face is warm. Your hands in your lap are warm. The chair beneath you is warm from your own warmth. The chair and you in a small private exchange of heat, a mutual holding. You breathe. A green pulse comes through the porthole. You can see it through your closed eyelids, or perhaps you imagine seeing it. A faint wash of green in the amber darkness behind your eyes. A soft brightening and softening that moves in the right direction, upward and diffuse, and then is gone. And the amber returns, and the wheel clank continues, and the chair holds you. You are not thinking about anything, or rather, thought is happening somewhere, the way weather happens somewhere, but it is not asking for your attention, and you are not offering it. There's only the warmth, and the chair, and the sound of the train, and the smell of old paper and beeswax and distant limestone, and the cool humidity against the backs of your hands where they rest open in your lap, and the sway, always the sway, left and right, so slow, so steady. The lantern at the far end of the car, the paler golden one, has dimmed a little. You notice this without any concern, the way you notice a sunset without being concerned that the sun is going. The flame has found its own quieter register, a lower burning, and the light from it is gentler than before, a warmer gold, and it falls on the far row of tide charts with particular softness now, turning them into something not quite paper and not quite fabric, something warm and continuous, a long, hanging warmth. Your breathing has slowed. You feel this, the way you can sometimes feel your own breathing from the outside, as a phenomenon, as something happening in your chest and your belly that is peaceful and involuntary and good. In, long and slow. Out, long and slow. The rhythm of it is close to the rhythm of the sway, close to the rhythm of the wheel clank. Not the same rhythm, but harmonious, as though your breathing has joined the train in a loose agreement about pace. The train curves, a very long, very gradual curve. You can feel it in the chair. A slight tilt, a slight increase in the lateral sway, the kind of curve that takes a full minute to complete. The scrolls and their clips lean together. The faintest whisper, all 12 together. And then the curve deepening, the lean holding, and the whisper becoming just the ghost of a whisper as the scrolls reach their angle and wait there. And the curve going on, and the amber light tilted just slightly toward one wall, the shadows on that side growing, and the shadows on the other side shrinking, and the pale golden lantern at the far end swinging on its bracket through a single slow arc, the light traversing the tide charts at a new angle, finding new surfaces, making the notation on them catch and flicker, like writing briefly read and then released. And then the curve beginning to ease, the scrolls beginning to settle, the lantern finding its level, the shadows redistributing, and the floor level again, and the wheels level again, and the steady clanking count of the rail joints resuming its most familiar form, and the curve finished, and the train going on. Deeper. You are very comfortable. This is worth saying plainly, without decoration. You are very comfortable. The chair holds you. The warmth holds you. The sound holds you. The amber light is on your closed eyelids, and it is amber even there, a faint, warm color in the dark, like the last light of an afternoon seen through a window when you are almost asleep on a sofa, and the room is familiar, and everything is fine. The tide charts hang in the dark behind your eyes, all 12 of them. The scroll you found to be old, honey-colored paper, the wide one that needed 2 clips, the one that exhaled when you hung it, releasing its small puff of clean air. They are all hanging in their places. The work is done. The car is complete. The train goes on. Clank. Clank. Somewhere farther back in the train, through the walls of the cars you have already passed through, very faint and low, the sound of another canister being drawn along its cable. Just the distant tick of it, the wire-drawn note, transmitted through the structure of the whole train to reach you here in Car 7 as barely anything, as almost silence, as the ghost of a sound. And then it is gone, and there is only the wheel clank, and the slight breath of the ventilation, and the scrolls, and the amber warmth. You feel the boundaries of the car receding, not disappearing. The car is still here, the chair is still here, the lacquered floor, and the brass rails, and the hanging tide charts are all still here, but they have become background rather than foreground, and what is foreground is only warmth and motion and sound, the warmth of the lanterns, the motion of the sway, the sound of the wheels. Clank, clank. The green light pulses somewhere outside. You don't see it, but you know it is there. The bioluminescent tide mark in the limestone, the living light in the deep rock. It pulses and fades, pulses and fades, patient and ancient, and entirely indifferent to anything except its own slow brightening and softening, its own private conversation with the dark. Your breathing, in, out, the chair, the warmth, the rocking, old paper, beeswax, limestone far away, the scrolls, all hanging, all in their places. The work is done. The train moves, always. The wheels on the wet rail. Clank, clank. The amber light, warm. The sway, slow. Your hands open in your lap. The tunnel deepens. The green light turns. The train goes on. You go with it. Warm, slow, still. The wheels, the dark, the warmth. Clank, clank. Somewhere, the scrolls, hanging. The green, warm. The train, going on. Deeper and warm. And still